Good morning, everybody. We'd like to call the meeting to order, and the first order of business is our public speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a lot of public speakers today, so I would ask if you are speaking, please confine your remarks to 2 minutes, and I'll call up the first person to speak, and then the next person, please be ready to follow him or her. Our first speaker is New York City Councilman Brad Lander to speak about the budget, and he'll be followed by Marty Goodman, also to speak about the budget.
Thanks very much. Good morning to the board members, and a big welcome to Chair Loda. I wish you very good luck and success in the job. I appreciate the work that has gone into preparing a budget revision and financial plan that seeks to close gaps without any additional service cuts to riders. That's obviously essential and a very important principle. But I also believe it is important in that light to focus on the service cuts which have already taken place in recent years, especially last year. And most significantly, what my office did was commissioned a report involving about 15 volunteers riding 700 buses on the B61 bus in Brooklyn, and I would like to share this with you. This is just the executive summary. There's really extensive data tables. Unfortunately, because there isn't yet bus time on this route, we had to go gather a whole lot of data. And unfortunately, we looked at this bus time because we've been hearing from many, many people who are regular users of that bus, which is the only public transportation serving Red Hook, about just how much worse it has gotten recently. So what we found were a few things that I think really surprised and distressed us. First, at peak hours, only 43% of the B61 buses are arriving within their headway time. 57% of the buses during peak hours arrive outside a headway. And it gets worse because 42% of the northbound buses during those same times are actually so full when they arrive at the station that they can't pick up any additional passengers. There's a lot more detail in the full report, but what's pretty clear is it's simply not meeting the needs of the riders. Now, we provide a lot of recommendations, low cost and no cost, for how the B61 can be adjusted. I won't go into them. They involve some modest route adjustments that could be no cost, but there is additional service required during peak hours that will cost a little bit of money. And so what I would urge you to do is take a look at the B61. We're working with staff on the modest adjustments, but there needs to be at least a little bit of resources to make this bus line meet its requirements for riders, and I think that could be done as part of this financial plan in a way that restores some service. Thank you very much. I wish you all happy, healthy holidays, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Councilman. The next speaker is Marty Goodman, followed by Maurice Wells.
Hello, my name is Marty Goodman, a station agent for 25 years. In August, a suicidal man jumped on the tracks near my booth at 86th Street in Central Park. I cut the power and he survived, and I felt great. But MTA, I appreciate the award I received, but it's hypocrisy, and I'm going to return it to you today. This is it. Hundreds of booths have been closed, slashing safety. In 2010, 470 station agents were laid off, slashing safety. Today, 147 remain jobless, and you also want one-person train operation. MTA, you've threatened the TWU with a 3-year zero contract, massive health care costs, or mass layoffs. Recently, a booth was removed at 181st Street on the A line near me, and I can tell you about it. There's filth, out-of-order machines, out-of-order escalators, no safety. A button connects to a booth at the other end as if a thug will let you call for help. No one is on duty if a rider is hurt on the escalator. In Herald Square, years ago, I saw a woman's sleeve get caught in a loose escalator handrail. I cut the power, saving her arm, maybe her life. On the eve of mass layoffs last year, says Local 100 President Samuelson, Jay Walder called him to say, quote, I'm going to sleep like a baby and you're not going to, end quote, Jay Walder. First up, over 200 station agents, mostly African-American, Hispanic, and immigrant workers, were laid off on Friday of Mother's Day weekend. Many mothers treated like dirt. Soon after layoffs, the MTA said it would triple its Wall Street senior investment advisors, salesmen, and bond insurers. Included were super crooks Goldman Sachs. What hypocrisy. MTA debt to banks and the 1% owners of MTA bonds, most of whom receive tax-free dividends, may consume 23% of the budget by 2018. Job cuts, safety cuts, contract zeros, fare hikes, all improve MTA bond ratings profits for the 1%. They sell, they party, we pay. Cancel the MTA debt, fund mass transit, not war. No to all contract givebacks, rehire station agents, reopen booths, no to zeros.
Thank you very much for your comments.
I'm going to return this right now.
Our next speaker will be Maurice Wells, followed by Grace Valdez.
That's disgusting. I'm leaving. Fire the MTA.
Good morning. My name is Maurice Wells. I've been a transit worker for 24 years. Have been a conductor for 23 years. Also a member of Transport Workers Union Local 100. I am here to express my outrage at your proposal to eliminate conductors' jobs. Again, you want to jeopardize the right and public safety. Last year you eliminated a lot of station agent jobs. Now you want to take conductors off the train. As a conductor who has worked the midnight tour, I cannot tell you how many times I have prevented people from being pickpocketed or I also called for police assistance after a person was robbed, which led to the arrest of the suspects. Another proposal that has outraged me is that you want to eliminate the break or rest period after a trip. You preach safety, but you certainly do not practice it. Bus operators and train crews need to have a rest period or break, especially after a long trip. As for your proposals for station cleaners to do other jobs, they have nothing to do trying to keep the stations clean. The stations are becoming like a rat race. You have to race a rat down to see who gets down on the platform first. Transit workers should not be held hostage because of your budget crisis. No givebacks, no way.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. The next speaker is Grace Valdez, followed by John Denny.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Grace Valdez. I started a petition in September trying to reopen the 181st Street train token booth. I had to save somebody who fell down those escalator steps and cracked their skull because there was nobody there. Do you understand how outraged I am on that? Do you understand that you lack safety, that there's nobody there if somebody gets injured? Do you understand the lack of maintenance in my station, the 181st A train station? Do you understand how bad it is to be a rider? I ride there a lot. I take that train station a lot. And I almost got mugged down there. Do you understand that if, there was nobody there, what could happen? That a loss of life could happen? A loss of limb? Can't you see how many people are outraged by this? I have 2,500 signatures on my petition that prove the same thing. There was a lady who said her daughter got assaulted down there. Do you want to keep continuing this? Is it necessary for you guys to take all these people out, these good people like Mr. Marty Goodman, out of these booths and risk our safety and our security just because you want to cut back a couple dollars? I don't understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valdez. Next is John Denny, followed by Paul Piazza.
Good morning. As one of the riding public, I'm extremely concerned about reports I have read in the press concerning your contract negotiations with the union representing your workers. Specifically, the reports that you are seeking to eliminate the title of conductor on the subways. If this is indeed your agency's position, it seems you are placing the riding public in dangerous conditions. With the motorman locked in his cab, you leave us with no human assistance in the event of emergencies, even life-threatening emergencies on these 600-foot trains. Coupled with the reductions in station agents, we wouldn't be in the vicinity of a human being trained to assist in an emergency once we descend below ground. Electronic eyes and cameras are wonderful tools, but they should supplement the human presence, not replace it. I am sorry to say that it seems to me as if your workers exhibit a higher regard and concern for the safety of your passengers than you do. I hope I am wrong, but I fear I am not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Denny. The next is Paul Piazza, followed by Rushdie Huck.
Good, happy holidays to everyone. I don't have a prepared speech like most people. I'm a representative of the transit TW Local 100. I represent station agents. I am currently involved in negotiations with the MTA on the contract about stations. We're bringing, I want everybody to know, the press, TW is bringing cost savings to the table. And I hope the MTA bargains in good faith, because you guys say you need money. We're giving you ideas how to save money. So let's get this ball rolling. The other thing I would like to say, in the spirit of the holiday season, 150 or so of my station agents are still out of work. They've been out of work since May 2010. It's about a year and a half. It would be a wonderful gesture of goodwill to these people to bring them back in the holiday season. Number one, you'd be helping 150 families of New Yorkers pay their bills and be productive citizens. Number two, just as important, you'd be showing the citizens of New York City, the people we're assigned to service every day, that you're serious about customer service, their welfare, and a train system we could all be proud of. By the way, Mr. Loda, good luck to you. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other often. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Piazza. Rushdie Huck, followed by Barbara Horowitz.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rushdie Huck. I'm a station agent for about 6 years. I would demand and expect everyone to reinstate and rehire the remaining 150 station agents as soon as possible. As far as I recollect from the media, the ex-chairman told that by laying off hundreds of station agents and MTA employees, the management will save about $24 million a year. After laying off over 900 employees in 4 months, by cautioned by the media, the management said, well, for now we are giving a lot of overtime, but it will be beneficial in the long run. Whereas earlier management said that we are down to the last dollar and we cannot keep them anymore. We have to lay off right away. I was laid off in August, and by December, in short 3 months, what went so well that management decided to hire the station agents. Not only just dozens, but hundreds. Over 300 station agents were hired. So instead of saving money, basically MTA wasted money by giving overtime and putting us in the deep ocean. If nothing else, one thing I learned being laid off, how to swim in the rough ocean. And this is what I will bring in my rest of the tenure here at work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huck. Barbara Horowitz is next, followed by Tamisha Chavez.
Hi, I'm a citizen. I'm not a rebel. I would like to make it work for my neighborhood. And I speak to everybody I can, and I can get signatures because everyone says they'll sign. I live near the UN. and taking the 104 from its turn, which is about 19 blocks, if you figure it out, east-west, has made it so difficult for senior citizens to buy tickets at Symphony Space, to buy tickets at Lincoln Center, to go to concerts, to travel, that they're not choosing to do that. And all those businesses are losing money. I'm thankful that I can walk and I don't need a cane and I don't need a walker. But in the winter especially, these people can't get around and they're choosing not to. And I've spoken to people who have actually moved back from Florida to New York because you don't feel isolated when you're in New York. I mean, I've had 71 years of joy in New York, and this is the first time I'm really feeling put out. I work in a lot of theaters and theater stuff, and it takes me an hour and a half sometimes to get home from Lincoln Center, and you have to wait on 42nd Street late at night for a long time. I'm willing to do it, but I think a lot of people in my neighborhood aren't. Tudor City, the other big houses around the missions to the UN. So if we could have that 104 returned east, made simpler for people to get to, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horowitz. Tamisha Chavez is next, followed by Jake Carlson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tamisha Chavez, and I've been a New York City resident my entire life, residing as a cooperator in Rochdale Village in southeast Queens for the past 20 of those years. I'm here today on behalf of the Rochdale Village Commuters in Action, and thusly would like to thank you before proceeding on their behalf for lending your ear to our dilemma. The means of transportation we'd like to discuss is the QM21 Express Bus service, which serves our community. For the past 5 years, this has been my personal means of transportation, and I even commuted here today. Riders on the QM21 are faced with a plethora of issues, including poor maintenance, old buses, and late drivers. The availability and reliability of the service is inadequate. The QM21 serves Rochdale Village and also Linden Boulevard, pickups along the way, and going on to the Van Wyck, making final 2 stops on Queens Boulevard and Briarwood, and then into Manhattan. It is the only express bus service option for many Queens residents. Ever since the service cuts in 2010, the QM21 service has progressively diminished, and we are subsequently down to 2 buses per hour in peak, meaning from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. there are only 3 buses available for people to travel. There were many stories of people waiting in the cold if a bus left a minute or 2 early, and buses too full to board. I could go on, but I assume you get the point. Back in February, Lorna and myself decided to distribute, we distributed basically a petition, and we had 375 signatures, which received a notice from the Riders Rebellion and Brody Enoch, and we have been since speaking out and trying to get better service for our community. We appreciate you listening to us, and on behalf of fellow New York City strap hangers, we appreciate the service that the MTA provides, and we hope and look forward to solutions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jake Carlson is next, followed by Murray Bowden.
Good morning to everyone, and a friendly welcome to Chairman Loda. My name is Jake Carlson. I work for We Act for Environmental Justice, where I'm the Transportation Equity Coordinator, and I also help manage the New York State Transportation Equity Alliance. In addition to our work around the disproportionate siting of diesel bus depots uptown, We Act has a program called TRACK, the Transit Riders Action Committee, where we organize transit riders in northern Manhattan to stop service cuts and fare hikes and to improve transit service for all of us uptown. I'm here today to express disapproval for the position that transit riders have been put in. 3 fare hikes in the past 3 years and the most devastating service cuts in a generation have severely impacted riders all across the city, but particularly low-income communities and communities of color. 30-day MetroCard usage is down in many of these communities because $104 is just too big of a hit for many to take at one time. This forces more people to buy 7-day cards and single ride fares, which means that many are disproportionately excluded from the value that an unlimited pass provides. Increasing the load of debt service will undoubtedly lead to greater strain on riders. The near $2 billion a year in debt service already contributes a significant burden on the operating budget, and expanding this burden will certainly create increased stress and will be put back where we were over a year ago. It's no secret that our MetroCards are on shaky ground. Regular rates from Albany, Cuomo's debilitation of the lockbox bill, while simultaneously gutting the MTA payroll tax, have all ensured a not-too-distant future of service cuts and fare hikes. The failure of leadership in Albany to protect transit-dependent communities across the state is now being realized in this budget proposal. As the second most segregated city in the country, affordable, accessible transportation is a vital tool for addressing persisting inequities. A path that will ensure more service cuts and fare hikes is therefore not a strategy that promotes equity. It is regrettable that this decision we are faced with. In future capital programs, I hope your eyes won't once again be bigger than your stomachs, and priority is given to effective and affordable alternatives, such as bus rapid transit. I hope our elected officials will someday realize how vital public transportation is for all New Yorkers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Murray Bowden, followed by Christopher Greif.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here to point out that there's an enormous cultural change that has to take place within the various units of the MTA. In particular, the bridge and tunnel. It's pretty much like the emperor has no clothes. They're doing a study about gateless tolling on Henry Hudson Bridge, and it is so flawed as to be. Alan, it's your responsibility as chairman of the Bridge and Tunnel Hillary, please don't take that off my time. It's your you're responsible as chairman of Bridge and Tunnel to make sure that Bridge and Tunnel will meet with me. When I go to the Port Authority and when the chairman opens the meeting, the last thing he says, if you would like to meet with anybody at the Port Authority, please ask. And I asked, and I meet with a half a dozen people there, quite successfully. I meet with people from Long Island Railroad, Allied Bus. But Alan, I can't meet with anybody with Bridge and Tunnel, and my comments are relevant. They're selling a bill of goods that's completely irrelevant. On your desk is a copy of a page from the guidelines and recommendations to accommodate older drivers and pedestrians, dated October 2001. If you notice, the picture on the right is arrow per lane, and it indicates clearly to the driver where you're going to be. The one that's up there now on the left is a dotted line which we can't see. Traffic engineers, in their wisdom, have said, we want it our way, we're not changing. And yet older drivers don't understand those little dots. You can't see it. So, Alan, it is your responsibility to ask them why they don't meet with me. And I will write a report. Mr. Chairman, if I may have another 30 seconds. I will ask them to write a report. I will write a report that goes to you and then goes to him. It's your responsibility to cover for him. He doesn't have to know everything. It's your responsibility. It happens other places, and it's time it happened here. And Mitch, it's your responsibility as chairman of the Metro North Committee to arrange for Howard to have somebody meet with me. Not necessarily Howard, but somebody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Christopher Greif, followed by Paul Steely-White.
Good evening. My name is Christopher D. Greif. Yes, I'm a member of New York City Transit Rights Council, but I'm also a member of other hats, and I'm not going there. The main thing is I'm here for is, as some of the members already know, what I'm here for is in Brooklyn, we're the only borough does not have a bridge bus going into Manhattan. We only have Queens and Staten Island. But we are concerned is because as you look on the J line, there is no elevators. Our population for people with disabilities and senior citizen populations are being hurt. They cannot go into Manhattan to go shopping. They can't go into Manhattan to go have a nice time in a restaurant or a theater. But it's hurting them because they cannot go into Manhattan. It's hard enough that the X-29 cannot run anymore because the 68 bus is overloaded. It's hard enough that people have to take the 62 bus to go all the way into Long Island City to finally get on a bus. The 62 bus, as well as the council member was correct about the 61, are overloaded due to the fact that these cuts have been hurting our customers. But the one thing is as you say safety. Safety is very important, but our disabled and seniors population need to be also safe as well to get on a subway or a bus. It is currently that the B39, the B51, the X29 must return running as they were before. The B4 bus also as well. I know I only have 30 seconds left. I'm in practice. I encourage you please to really focus strongly with your hearts, because our disabled population like to go traveling into another borough to have fun. New York City is supposed to have fun and entertainment. We're the only borough in Brooklyn that does not have a bus to go into Manhattan. The express bus is too much money for them to go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Paul Steely White, followed by Gene Rushinoff.
Hello, I'm the Executive Director of Transportation Alternatives. We're here today to echo our grave concerns that were expressed by the gentleman from WEACT about the shaky financing of the capital plan. In the last 36 hours, we've collected hundreds of letters from riders all over the system expressing their concern about the pressure on the fare and on potential service cuts that this debt-financed plan presents. Here's a sample letter that's very typical of the hundreds. Dear Governor Cuomo, our Metro cards are not your credit card. Racking up billions of dollars in debt in our names with no plan from Albany to pay it off is unsustainable. Governor Cuomo, you need to step up and support transit riders with stable and sustainable funding. Sincerely, James Christensen. So I know Governor Cuomo's not here today, but maybe one of you board members would be so kind to deliver these hundreds of letters from riders, again, just collected in the last 36 hours. How did we get here? All of you are familiar with the theft of dedicated transit revenue. Hundreds of millions of dollars taken from dedicated transit revenue and used for other purposes. The gutting of the payroll mobility tax. And of course, the continual failure to find sustainable revenue to fund our subways and buses, which we all know is the foundation of our city and state economy. Governor Cuomo, the MTA, our state legislators need to go back to the table and find sustainable funding for the capital plan, which we all know is valuable. But funding it with billions of dollars of more debt is not the way to go. That's only going to strap the riders with more fare hikes and service cuts. And we all know that's the case. So please go back to the table, find sustainable, stable revenue for our subways and buses. Thank you.
Thank you. Gene Rushinoff, followed by William Henderson.
Good morning. I'm Gene Rushinoff with the Strap Hangers campaign. And this morning I'm going to read from a letter that we sent to the MTA on November 28th that came from us, the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, Transportation Alternatives, and the Tri-State Transportation Campaign. Dear Chairman Saul and Director Loda, we write to express our strong support for the $20 million Service Restoration Fund recently proposed by several MTA board members. As you know, in June of 2010, the MTA implemented the harshest transit service cuts within memory. These cuts included killing 20 local and 12 express bus routes, eliminating 570 bus stops, condemning millions of subway riders to longer trips and waits, more crowding, and extra transfers, reducing service on the Long Island Railroad's Port Washington branch, Greenport branch, and West Hampstead branch, and reducing services on Metro North's Harlem, Hudson, New Haven, and Pascack Valley lines. The MTA officials acknowledge that these cuts have resulted in, quote, less convenient service for 15% of bus and subway riders. Our group strongly recommend that the MTA Board restore as much convenient service for its riders as it can and establish a $20 million fund for service restorations. And we urge you to do this when you adopt your budget. My group understands the fiscal constraints that the MTA is under, but your financial plan calls for 3 fare hikes in 5 years. If you continue on the rate you are going, the MTA is on its way to charging $167 for a 30-day unlimited ride Metro card by 2017. Will you really charge so much for the level of inadequate service you are now offering? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rushinoff. And our last speaker is William Henderson.
Good morning. I'm Bill Henderson, the Executive Director of the PCAC. Today, the board is poised to approve a $12.67 billion budget with many moving parts. As I did at the Finance Committee on Monday, I'm here to ask you to take a modest step towards restoring vital service that was cut last year. A proposal that has been made is for a $20 million, and that's $0.02 billion service restoration fund. It wouldn't restore all the damaging cuts that have been made, but it would allow the agencies to eliminate some of the more egregious impacts of the cuts and to have the flexibility to make low-cost beneficial changes. We understand the financial situation, but riders are being hurt, and the aggregate impacts are making the MTA system less convenient and more difficult to navigate, and it's discouraging people from using the system. At the larger level, this is a burden on our economy. You only have to see what's happening on the L line when service is shut down to see what service losses do to businesses. You're also considering a revised capital program today. This, again, won't resolve every issue for the riders. There's still going to be some awful stations in the system, even if everything in the capital program was done. It's an understatement, though, to say that we're uncomfortable with using pay-as-you-go money to fund bonds to finance capital improvements through 2014 when pay-go money would have gone far beyond that. We recognize that this is a choice between the lesser of two evils. Doesn't mean we have to like it, and we need to find some other means of financing capital. We've pushed the envelope as far as we can. We have to now begin a candid conversation about how this state and city will pay for capital needs of the system, and recognize that real resources need to be approved, and there's no more tricks and one-shots available. We need to start the conversation now because 2015 is going to be here soon. There's few sources of funds for 2015, but there's a lot of uses out there. We ask you to come with us to Albany to speak to our elected officials, to speak to the city officials, and to find a reasonable and responsible way of funding the capital program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the public speaking.
Good morning. First, on behalf of the MTA family, I'd like to wish everybody a healthy and happy holiday season. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes of last month's meeting, which have been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections or omissions? If not, may I have a motion? A motion's made. And a second, please. All in favor? Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Before we get into our regular agenda, Susan Metzger is going to make a welcome presentation. An award is always welcome here at the MTA. Susan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the board is aware, over the last 3 years, the Office of Civil Rights, in association with the operating agencies and the Board Diversity Committee, have been working on trying to expand our minority and small business subcontractors and suppliers. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I'm very pleased to tell you that on November 17th, Mike Garner accepted this award on behalf of the MTA. This award is from the New York and New Jersey Minority Supplier Development Council, and it recognizes MTA as the Regional Corporation of the Year. So I'm very pleased to say that Mike and I would like to present this to the MTA as a whole. But I can't find Mike. There he is. This belongs to MTA as a whole.
I was going to accept it on behalf of the MTA, I assure you. Great work. Great work. Really, you've done a great job. Thank you. Susan, thanks for the presentation. Always a welcome thing. Now we will consider the 2012 budget materials and the 2010 through 14 capital program amendment. In a moment, I'll turn the floor over to our Executive Director, Joe Loda, MTA Chief Financial Officer, Bob Foran, and MTA Head of Capital Programs, Linda Kleinbaum, to introduce the action items we'll be addressing today for the 2012 budget and the capital program. Before I do, I think it's important to recognize what's happened to us over the past month, which is that our fiscal situation has become even more fragile. I will let Joe go through the details, but it should be clear to everyone that we're not out of the woods by any stretch. I know everyone here wants to be in a place to restore service, and that's myself included. But as I said last month, and it's even truer now, it's just not appropriate in our current fiscal situation. Joe, would you like to make some comments, please?
Thank you, Andrew. Before I talk about the budget, I'd like to thank Mike Garner for his help and support in creating the Minority Business and Women Enterprise Program here at the MTA, for which the award was just given. The program has been quite successful and is becoming a role model for all of the agencies and authorities in the state of New York, because we've advanced it farther than almost anyone else. Andrew, thank you. Today we're seeking board approval for both the 2012 operating budget and an amendment to our capital program to allow our funding to move forward for the next 3 years. There are a few points I'd like to highlight before Bob and Linda walk us through the approval process. First, I'd like to reiterate what Andrew has said about how fragile our operating budget and financial plan is. Because of the enormous efforts that have been made over the last 2 years, we've been able to balance the budget this year, and our 4-year plan, while manageable, will require us to continue our vigilance on expense control day in and day out. Last month we talked about many risks to the plan, and in the past month we've seen some further projections slip even further. Earlier this month we were informed by the Budget Division in Albany that due to the economic activity or the lack thereof, that monies that are being received from MMTOA have declined, projected to decline by $87 million during 2012 alone. We've also seen in the past month a reduction in the payroll mobility tax, which will substantially kick in on April 1st of 2012. We have, however, received assurances from the governor and the state legislature, a commitment to replace every penny that will be lost. And as with everyone in this room, I will be making sure that that is the case. When it comes to our operating budget, the bottom line, as I said before, is that it's fragile and that we're going to continue constant management control of the budget. The second point I'd like to make is about our capital program, and I believe now more than ever how important it is to our regional economy, not just here in New York, but throughout the entire state. At a time when the state's economy is struggling, the MTA Capital Program is a unique and very powerful stimulus package. Our plan is projected to deliver over 350,000 jobs and $44 billion of economic activity. These jobs, as we all know, are not just located in our operating region, but throughout the entire state of New York. And most important of all, our capital program sustains and grows the regional economy by allowing us to continue to provide a safe and reliable transportation service for our $3 trillion economy. The proposals that are before the board today are to approve the funding for the final 3 years of our capital program. I agree with many statements that have made. It is not the most ideal program, but I do believe it is the best option that we have available to us. It'll fund our critical capital program. It will include all commitments. It includes commitments from all of our funding partners at the federal level, the state level, and the city level. And more importantly, I believe it is affordable within our operating budget. Debt service is covered by existing pay-as-you-go capital in the funds, and the percentage of debt to outstanding capital investments is the lowest it's going to be in the last 15 years. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I think we're ready for Bob Friend.
Thank you. Certainly. Commissioners, you all have the budget adoption package, and I'm going to be giving you a brief summary of the items that are here in the staff summary. First, let me just remind you again that the November plan that we presented last month did achieve near-term balance, but we identified certain risks. And the executive director and the chairman have both gone through and discussed those. But just to summarize, we were projecting a $179 million operating cash balance for the close of this year. Now that cash balance was going to be rolled forward into next year to offset a comparable deficit to give us a break even for 2012. we were looking at an operating cash balance of $96 million in 2013, which again was going to be rolled forward to offset the deficit that we had in that year, but still a deficit of about $122 million would remain. And then projecting to 2015, we're looking at another $206 million deficit. Well, the risk that we faced then are the same risk we're facing now. We said if there's a worsening in the economy, those numbers could change. If there was a reduction in state subsidies or dedicated taxes, we could have a problem. If we don't hit the ever-increasing expense reduction targets, that could create larger deficits. If we don't hit the 3 net zeros labor initiative that we have out there, that would be a problem. And 2, if we can't fund the 12, 13, and 14 years of our 10 to 14 capital program, that was going to create a problem. Well, as I've indicated in red up there, we've already been faced with one of these, and that's the reduction in state subsidies. As the Executive Director mentioned, through conversations with the Division of Budget, we're now projecting that in 2012 we'll see a reduction in the MTOA taxes of $87 million next year, $58 million in 2013, $45 and $47 in the following 2 years. Now, offsetting that is we are seeing an increase in the MTA aid. That's the kind of package of fees and taxes that came in along with the PMT in 2009. So $13 million more this year, and we're projecting $7 million more every year thereafter. So that offsets it somewhat. Now, what I haven't shown up here is the reduction in the PMT as a result of what we call the December Act, the legislation that was just passed. And that's because in the Act it says that we are to receive alternative funding of a comparable amount to offset that. So again, we're taking the legislature at face value that they will completely restore the funds that are being taken away, and that's about $310 million a year. So what does that mean to our budget? Well, you can see the difference here. The increased revenues this year takes our operating cash balance up to $192 million, which again will roll forward into next year, but now with that $87 million MTOA deficit that we're looking at, we're still looking at a $67 million reduction in the deficit. Our operating balance in 2013 now goes from $96 million down to $45 million, and you can see a significant increase in the deficits in 14 and in 15. Well, what do we plan on doing about it? Well, we've already started to address these, and we have actions included in the budget that's in front of you to address that. The first thing we're doing is we had a small amount of general reserve still remaining for this year that we had set aside for storms that might happen, and we've been very fortunate that thus far our weather has been much more favorable than it was last year. So that's $8 million. You may recall that we increased our general reserve from $100 million to $125 million for next year. And one of the reasons we said we were doing that is because of these risks that were out there. Well, we're already going to take $25 million of that right off the table immediately to address this risk. Then we've also targeted $25 million of unspecified reductions, cost reductions. And I say it's unspecified because we don't know what they are yet. We have a plan and we're working toward them, and we will identify them early in 2012, and they will be rolled into the July plan. But again, $35 million of recurring savings is what we're planning on putting in. If you put those all together, you can then see the result that we have in front of us. We have a financial plan that continues to be fragile. While we go up to an operating surplus or operating cash balance projected for 2011 of $200 million, again, that rolls forward into 2012, and we're still just breaking even. We're projecting a cash balance in 2013 that will drop by $16 million, and deficits in 14 and 15 that increase by $19 million and $5 million. We are still very fragile, and I would in fact say we're probably more fragile because we've already started to use some of the reserves that we had built into our budget. The risks that we identified in the very first chart are the same risks that we face. This is a very difficult time for us. But this is a budget that I think, again, is manageable if we achieve the target savings that we have if we achieve the labor initiatives that we have, if we get our capital program funded. With that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you have. Okay.
How much recurring obligations have we removed from the budget over the last 2 years?
I think right now we're right around, I think it's about $800 million, $750 million of ongoing recurring savings.
The initial submission we put in, we took it down by $2 billion, and now we're anticipating by the end of the program to take it down another $2 billion.
$4 billion in capital.
Correct. $4 billion.
And about $750 million a year.
Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, we're going to ask Linda to do the capital plan, and then we'll vote on both of the capital plan and the budget after Linda's presentation.
Thank you. So we had initially anticipated bringing the program to you, the funding program to you in January, but have moved it to this month because, as you know, last week the conversation was started in Albany with the governor and the legislature about the connection between infrastructure investment and jobs. And in our view, it's critical to have our program and the funding proposal in Albany during this time because there's probably no better plan for job creation and economic stimulus than the MTA program. You heard the executive director talk about the estimate for the number of direct and indirect jobs that are supported by our capital program throughout the state. And I think you've heard me say that the Building Congress has estimated that a fully funded 2012 MTA capital program will account for between 20 and 25% of the construction jobs in this region. So for us, having this program approved, not only important to ensuring the reliability and expansion of our system and the growth of the region, but it's also important for the economic health of the entire state. So first and foremost, in presenting this funding proposal to you and to Albany is a self-help component. As I said in answer to a question, you may remember that when we submitted this program in April of 2010, when we resubmitted it, we took the proposal down by $2 billion. We are proposing now to take it down by another $2 billion through efficiency reductions, in essence following the same pattern of new way of doing business as has been proposed and has been met in the operating budget. So this would take the $26.3 billion program down to $24.3. And you may remember that what we submit to CPRB does not include bridges and tunnels. So the program that is what we call the CPRB program is takes a $23.8 billion program down to $22.2. So how will we meet these efficiency reductions? By driving to new way of business, much like we've been doing in the operating budget. And we've been talking to you about a lot of these initiatives, mostly through CPOC, but it's come up at various of the operating committees as well. We are seeking to have greater productivity along the right-of-way. 30% of the capital program projects occur along the right-of-way, whether it's track, power, signals. It's all right-of-way work that if you can get more hours of work at a time, you reduce your costs. This is one of the initiatives that was reported to the Transit Operating Committee recently in this regard was Transit's line segment closing project, which would increase productivity tremendously. And those help not only our in-house right-of-way projects, but also third-party projects. We're looking to reduce the cost of rolling stock. We have over $1 billion of investment in M9s for Long Island Railroad and East Side Access, and we have over $1 billion in bus procurements over the last 3 years of this program, and we'll be looking to make savings in those. We're moving whenever we can to component replacement in lieu of the entire asset investment. This is something we've been doing for a while now in stations. A recent report at CPOC indicated that there are opportunities in track to do component investment instead of pulling out entire lengths of track, which is also reducing costs. We're looking to reduce costs in capital program management. We've already taken a 15% reduction in capital program management administration, and we're looking to review overhead and the structure by which we run capital program management to compare the benefits of in-house work versus third party and see which is more efficient. And we're using the Gates process, which stops a project at various points from inception to implementation to review that it's being proposed for the most cost-effective and efficient method possible, and then to ensure that it continues to move forward in that vein. So this reduction includes all of our agencies, and when you take off the reduction attributed to B&T, the rest, what we call the core program reduction, the CPRB agency reductions, has been applied by shares, and then a 10% has been taken off the elements, and you can see that in the blue pages of the program that was submitted to you. I suspect that as actual savings evolve over time, they will be different than the way we've shown them in the blue pages, and we will use CPOC as a regular reporting mechanism to the board on how we're doing against savings targets, and we will report to CPRB through the quarterly tracking committee on how we're doing against those targets. The next two slides that I'm going to go through are what we consider the meat of a capital program or an amendment, and those are slides on the uses of funds and sources of funds. This uses of funds chart shows you the allocations by agency, which basically what this chart then shows is how the $2 billion in efficiency targets are applied across the family of agencies. You see how the CPRB program is a $22.2 billion program. The total MTA program becomes a $24.3 billion program. What's most significant relative to what's being sent is before you and being sent to Albany is the sources of funds. We've talked to you about this usually in a slightly different format based on the specific sources, but this in essence does the same thing. What you see here is the first vertical column is what we approved and was approved by CPRB in 2010. From that, you see that we had a fully funded 10 and 11 program, and what we had promised to come back to CPRB, to you and to CPRB with, was funding for the last 3 years, which is what that third column shows you. So the first thing we have is federal funds. The feds have been a wonderfully consistent partner for us. We had, however, assumed that we would have reauthorization, federal reauthorization for formula money starting in 12. In fact, as you know, Congress has not passed reauthorization, so we have changed our assumption to be steady federal funding through the last 3 years of the program. But we also have achieved a high-speed rail grant from the feds, which is the next line, the 295. Federal security money stays what we had anticipated. The next line is a new source of money that we've talked to the committee about, which is the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing. This is a federal RIF loan available through FRA for railroad projects. We've applied to this for East Side Access. It has very favorable terms. The feds have told us that they are moving this forward, but they will not give final approval for the RIF loan until they know that the entire funding plan for the last 3 years is in place. For the feds, it's equally important as it is for you to ensure that core system work continues while we finish the expansion projects. The federal bus money hasn't significantly changed. City capital funds anticipate, in addition to the $100 million that we get a year from the city, an additional contribution. We've been working cooperatively with the city on creative, non-traditional ways to accomplish this, and we believe that this is a reasonable assumption for the plan. Similarly, we have $770 in state assistance. We've been working cooperatively with the state on this, and we believe it too is a reasonable assumption for the plan. The plan assumes $4.5 billion in transportation revenue bonds to support the program. We talked to you last month about the RIF loan and the revenue bonds being supported by PAYGO. That's already capital PAYGO. That's already in the budget, so that this has no additional impact on the budget. And Bob went through a presentation last month on why we consider it to be affordable and reasonable. Other includes $640 million in remaining PAYGO that's available as a funding source to the program after you use the other PAYGO for debt service, and it also includes $250 million from the disposition of MTA assets. And that basically brings you to $13 billion in funding for the last 3 years, which fully funds the $22.2 billion program that we're proposing. I remind the board that the program, the 5-year program of projects, has been fully approved. What was approved by CPRB was the 5-year program with a commitment for us to come back relative to the funding for the last 3 years. The only difference in the program of projects is we've added the Steinway Tunnel project for transit, which was talked about at the Transit Committee meeting. Through the efficiency improvements that we've discussed and the financing proposal that we put forth here, all of these projects will be implemented. It does not require any new revenue sources, and there's no additional budget on the no additional burden on the operating budget. The critical nature of this, again, is not just our system reliability and growth, but the economic well-being of the region and the state. With that as the backdrop, we've asked that the Board of Directors approve the proposal to fund the remainder of the 10 to 14 capital program and authorize this proposal to be submitted to the Capital Program Review Board for their approval. And now I can answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions? Chuck?
Mr. Chairman, I paid close attention to this presentation both previously and today, and failed to hear any effort or any figures being applied for the end of sole source and non-competitive bidding. The only way you can reduce these multi-million, multi-billion-dollar contracts is to have competitive bidding that provides jobs, that provides opportunities, and that increases opportunities in New York State. I know our incoming chairman and our current chairman both subscribe to the view that we must increase competition. I would like to stress that that should be the hallmark of this budget and the hallmark of our efforts in the coming year. I thank you.
Any other questions?
A question about there's a statement on page 5, there is no additional burden on operating budget, and I understand I have no dispute that through 2014, but 2015, which is outside this capital program we're proposing, it was assumed there'd be PAYGO money, correct? But that's going to be taken up with bonds. So, and I guess another assumption we might make is that there'll be a new capital program in 2015. So I just think that by saying there's no impact on operating budget in 2015 just isn't, I don't think it's a correct statement. Because I think there probably would.
Bob, would you like to Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it's a completely accurate statement. I think in 2015 we have $300 million worth of PAYGO built into our budget, and we are using a portion of that for debt service on the obligations that we are suggesting that you approve today to fund the capital program, and we still have PAYGO there. But we, throughout the period of time that I showed in the last meeting, in the last presentation, or the November meeting, November presentation, we are not increasing the burden to the operating budget. We're using the same dollars that we had in there for PAYGO to now be used for debt service and upfront a little PAYGO. Now, as regard to your comment about the 2015 to 19 capital program, that will have to be addressed, and that will be something that will be brought to the board and will be discussed with the legislature and the executive branch in the future.
Well, as long as that's clear. Anyway, just a brief comment. The 250, just so people understand, 2015 we're kind of open on this. That's what should be clear about it, and the financial plan we're adopting.
Any other comments? Okay. Linda and Bob, thanks for a very good presentation. Now I need a motion to adopt the MTA 2012 Consolidated Final Proposed Budget, the four-year financial plan for 2012 through 2015, the individual agency budgets and financial plans, and the budget and plan adjustments, budget and cash management actions, and other staff actions, all as presented in the budget staff summaries contained in the board materials. May I please have a second? Okay. All in favor?
No. Excuse me. I'd like to amend the proposal on the table. As I'm switching roles here with Mitch, I'm making a motion to amend this budget for the in the following way. And please, after the debate that I heard at Finance, there seemed to be, in my view, a lot of misunderstanding of what we were talking about. What I am seeking, and what I believe the second will seek, is an amendment to reapportion some of the money that is already committed, not a single dollar more, into this budget of current expenditures, and authorize the chair to put $20 million of that towards the restoration of services and the enhancement of services around the city. In my view, it's approximately the equivalent of about 300 positions, and I would recommend that they be from the managerial, technical, and professional ranks, and that they go into bus drivers and train operators to restore the services. So that would be my motion.
Okay, so what we have to do now is go back and we have an amendment to the proposed budget, and therefore we need a second on the amendment.
I will second the amendment.
Okay, and now I would call for any comments on the amendment before we take a formal vote.
Okay. On the amendment, I read in the online yesterday a comment from a very brave inside MTA source who suggested that we would restore service, that the pace at which we would restore service would be a longer wait than weekend service that we currently provide, which I always appreciate insiders who don't have the courage to speak on the record and air it out. And I certainly respect all of you and your opinions that are at this table, but for those of you, those staffers who feel the need to comment on what we may disagree about, it irks me the notion that that a snarky comment like that could characterize how cavalier the situation of service restorations is treated by some in this agency. And that's very distressing to me. As I look around the room, and I remember some of you sitting with us, but unfortunately not enough of you were there or were here on the board at the time, as we sat through 40 hours of public hearings in what I would describe the other New York. People who are desperate for our service, and New York is not just Manhattan and the subways and living on a line and getting on and off and going up. There are people who are very dependent upon our bus service throughout the region, and I understand our fiscal situation quite well. And this is my fourth budget that I've been dealing with. I'm not talking about a serious financial rejiggering here. We're talking about $20 million, the equivalent of 300 employees, to go out of a 66,500 employee pool in total. Okay, to do this. During the debate at Finance, there were a lot of things that were thrown out there, and people are worried. They're worried that the situation is changing, and I think we should be concerned. Okay, but I do have faith and confidence in the people that have been leading our efforts to consolidate, and I have faith and confidence in our new chair who's coming in. I think that he'd like as much room as possible, but as those of us who have been out there fighting the fight for to protect the rider in the service area, I think that we have an obligation to push the institution to do more with less. The mayor, in his State of the City speech this year, used that as a theme, and many city agencies are in fact providing greater direct services with it. The governor uses it in his speeches and has done throughout his career, both before he became governor and now. And we have an obligation to do more with less. We are not asking here for a single dollar to be added to this budget. We're simply seeking to reprioritize. We've already cut $780 million out of our expense budget through these kind of consolidations. I'm asking for a $20 million additional cut in another area that we would move into giving the riders a break in services that they so desperately need. These aren't pet projects. Okay, I have no vested interest. I'm not advocating for a single jurisdiction here. I'm looking throughout the region. Just as we all supported wholeheartedly the $25 million going to Port Jervis when that catastrophe claimed that was the right thing to do. It wasn't a pet project. There was no debate as to the rightness or wrongness of it. When I'm saying we need to give voice to the other New Yorkers out there who came to our public hearings and who are desperate to see this agency show them something in the way of service restoration. So I would ask you to please, and if need be, we can make it conditional upon the governor and the legislature putting the money in, making this whole dollar for dollar on this restorations. If that's a worry that was expressed the last time, I will make a motion at that time. If the governor and the legislature don't do it, to table the restorations. We couldn't possibly do this for another 6 to 9 months anyway, with the timetable and having staff identify the projects and so forth. But we need to show the riders out there that that we're listening, that we have their backs, and that we're moving in this direction. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would anybody like to speak on the amendment? Chuck? Chuck, then Carl. You'll be next, Carl. Let Chuck go first. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to associate myself with the remarks made by Alan Capelli and by Gene Russino. There is room in this budget by way of consolidation of services, by way of dropping services that are frills and not necessary, and by doing things that reprioritize and consolidate and achieve more for less, to provide that signal token to the public that we really care about service, that we really want to restore the kind of service they demand and that they are entitled to and that they are paying dearly for. It seems to me that this is a mother and apple pie motion, that you cannot vote against it because it doesn't cost the public anything. It gives them a benefit. This is a very fragile budget. Those who have worked on it have done a Herculean job in trying to construct it to make some sense, especially in the face of the cuts that we have sustained, cuts that, in my view, are entirely unwarranted. And it seems to me that this is the kind of a proposal that makes sense to the riding public, the tax-paying public, and public servants. I would endorse that remark entirely and proposal.
Yeah, I feel terrible about speaking out against this, but I just think that if we start doing this right now in the financial shape that we're in and not even knowing what's down the road in front of us, and this thing has to be turned around and taken away from them in the future, would just look horrible. And I think that we should really wait and see what happens with our budget and what kind of financial shape we're in the next couple of months before we start giving anything back. Because once we start doing that and then have to take it away at the end, we're going to be in bad shape. And I feel, I really agree with what everybody said. If we could give back more to everybody, but to take one $20 million deal and give it back and then have to pull it out again, and then you're going to have everybody else coming up and want their routes funded or put back in service. So I won't say anything further, but I think it's a good idea to try to do it. if we have the money and nothing changes.
I believe the executive director would like to make a statement.
I'd like to address a couple of the issues that have been raised. And Alan, you mentioned a snarky comment. If you could forward that to me. One thing I will tell you from a the staff point of view, talk on the record all the time, not off the record. That's my preference. I have no idea what that comment was, but I'd like to see it and understand what was said and the method in which it was said. That being said, I do want to highlight how dangerous this proposal is to this budget. Mr. Mergler said we have the money. We have $750 million in cuts in this budget, 50 million of which have yet to be identified. What you would be burdening this budget with is another 20 million on top of the 50 million that hasn't been identified, which is $70 million in additional cuts. It is inaccurate to say that it will not cost anything. You have to understand that in this budget, which I said that we will have to manage daily, this is not a budget that you just look at the beginning of the year and then look at quarterly and see how you did. It's one in which we have to drive to get to these efficiencies and to continue to have further expense reductions. We have a revenue problem and we have an expense problem. And at this point, there's not a whole lot that we can do to deal with the revenue problem. So we have to make it to deal with the expense problem and find a way to continue to be as efficient as we possibly can to avoid any further service reductions. I don't want to see service reductions. I'm not threatening service reductions either. But I'm saying that we have to find ways to continue to reduce our headcount at the administrative level, and we have to find ways to be more efficient. So any idea that this doesn't cost money or doesn't cost pain it is just erroneous and I think is misleading. There will be a day, I hope, I pray, that we will be able to restore service so that we will have an opportunity. And combined with the fact, and talking about something that hasn't been talked about, but was mentioned with the 2015, begin a process to work in both Albany and the city to find additional funding sources. For me to say that we don't have that it's a revenue problem requires us to work with our partners in Albany and at the city level to restore levels of funding necessary. It's got to be an effort that we go in both directions. But right now, what's confronting us is an expense problem, and we have to continue to be vigilant at that expense problem. Thank you.
I appreciate the comments of the executive director, but it always seems in year after year of these budgets that the budgets always seem to be balanced on the backs of the riders, and I think that has to change at some point. Riders are now getting accustomed to higher fares and less service, which is a terrible equation. You heard about some of the bus reductions and how they've affected the public in today's public testimony, specifically the M104, the B61, the B39, and the B54. All have caused great harm and possibly have cost us some riders in the system. Really ironic is the fact that just as New Jersey Transit, which for years had no weekend service on the Pascack Valley line, they put weekend service back on this side of the Hudson. We took weekend service away from the West Hempstead and Greenport branches. Unheard of on this side of the Hudson. We're going to have a great capital plan. We're going to have great facilities, but we're not going to have that much service running on them. And the Atlantic Viaduct is a perfect example. We just renovated it to $90 million. We have 6 hours less service on the Atlantic Viaduct, which is a great transit facility and which should be used a lot more. I agree with those that say, while it looks on paper as though pay-go capital is not burdening the expense budget, that's in a perfect world. But things happen, and I'm just not totally sanguine that it's not going to put extra pressure on the fare and on service. I, too, would love to see the day when we can put a lot of service back. I think June 27th, 2010, to paraphrase, and I'm not trying to equate the events, was a day that will live in infamy. I just think it was a terrible day for New York. I think this is the treasure of our region, and I don't think the state or the city are treating it as that. During the Finance Committee, it was said we would be sending a signal to Albany if we passed service restorations. Well, what kind of signal are we sending to Albany if we keep bailing them out for their failure to fund our capital plan? That's just nuts. There's another problem. When any of the agencies wants to make a service improvement because there was a a new traffic generator built, for instance, a college or a shopping mall, you can't provide additional service to those unless you take it away from somewhere else. Everything has to be revenue neutral. That's a hell of a way to run a transit system. That gives us no options. So, it's great that the state and the city say that this is going to give a tremendous amount of new jobs. Well, why don't they treat the capital plan like the important thing it is? Fund it. Don't ask the riders to always be the ones to fund it. Thank you.
Mitch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the Executive Director for his remarks, all of which I agree with, except the conclusion. In my opinion, this is the absolute best time to restore some service restorations, not the worst time. It is the best time for a variety of reasons, partially financial, because of the way our financial plan is created, but also because of the credibility of this authority. For those of us who have been here a number of years, it was the worst thing we ever did for service cutbacks. I have people on Long Island who have absolutely no service anymore, none, at certain parts of the day. I have service that is clearly inadequate and does not meet the service guidelines. And yet, for a variety of reasons, we have not been able to restore any of that. Working with my friend Alan, with Andrew, I've learned a lot about the bus system in New York City and what it means, especially in those areas where there is no subway service. It is to them what the subway is or what the Long Island Railroad is to my constituents in that regard. The budget that Bob pointed out in a variety of ways, all of which I agree with, is a series of projections. It's a series of assumptions. It's a series of estimates. On the other hand, we have real people who have real issues about getting around this region, and this $20 million amendment is part of that solution. Not a total solution, but part of that solution. And I think it is well within the confines of this budget to reprioritize certain things that we otherwise might want to do or have to do, including the costs we have of all the additional bonding we're now going to put out there. While it may not affect the operating budget directly, and I agree with Ira, it will at some point, we are going to have substantial costs in selling all of these bonds, both for the capital program, because from the chart, there's an additional $4 billion in bonds. There are costs associated with that we have to pay. I see no reason why we can't use some of those funds for this $20 million fund. I'd much rather give the money to restore service to the people of this region than give it to the investment bankers who are making a fortune off of this authority, and based upon the capital plan that we will get to shortly, will continue to make a fortune off of this authority. That, to me, is not the best use of limited amount of funds when we have an alternative which is absolutely necessary. I thank my fellow commissioner for taking up the issue that I brought up in finance. I strongly support the amendment, and I would urge all of my other commissioners to do the same. Thank you.
Fred?
I heard two things this morning that I did not hear on Monday that give me pause. One is a specific proposal about that was identified where to get this money from. It's not an unreasonable proposal, given where we are with respect to this budget. The second thing I heard was a willingness to defer this entire proposal should our condition deteriorate further. Again, a very reasonable reaction to the discussion we had in committee on Monday. At that time, I couldn't vote on that, but I said I would be loath to vote for it because a lot of things I didn't know, like what specifically would be restored, where it would be restored, and there's certainly things I don't know about what staff would be identified either not to be hired, not to be replaced, or laid off, and that's a crummy alternative. However, it seems to me that if we hire all the time, and we do, and we are not engaged in a hiring freeze at management levels or anything else, we may want to consider those sources to try to recover this $20 million. Do we have a hiring freeze? Yes, sir. We do. Yes, sir. Nobody's hired in management and technical or in supervisory positions.
We, if I might, we just went through a 15% reduction in administrative headcount last year. We took a 20% reduction in administrative headcount at headquarters last year.
I'm not talking about reductions. I said hiring freeze.
And we certainly don't want to be hiring unless we have an absolute need for that. I think
we're talking different languages, Bob. I said hiring freeze. That's a term that a lot of us around this table who have participated in making budgets before understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Commissioner. I really do, and I'm not trying to parse words. What I'm saying is we are really trying to hold all of our costs at headquarters down, because what we're trying to do is make sure that the monies we do have can go into service and can be there for service. But the one point I really do want to make is I don't know where we're going to get the $35 million that I just said we're going to cut. I don't know where I'll get this $20 million. I'm $55 million, and the chairman has talked frequently, and I think you've heard him, and I am very concerned what's going to happen in the first quarter when we see what the Wall Street bonuses aren't. The comptroller has said he is expecting to see Wall Street bonuses down 30 or 40%. That hits our PMT, our payroll mobility tax. Frankly, I am preparing to have significant expense reductions well beyond what we've stated here. So I'm telling you, if you want to put this in place, you're putting a $20 million burden on us when in the back of my mind and the back of the budget department, we're already trying to figure out what are we going to do when the whole payroll economy comes down. Wall Street is, I don't know, 20% of our economy. What do we do? So that's my point.
I take this entire conversation deadly seriously, and I know you do too. And there are things I'm hearing this morning that I didn't hear Monday when this was first put on the table. But better late than never. I think what we need to do is have a very full airing of this, however long it takes, so that we really understand what's at play here. I'm concerned about where you get the money from, but I also know that, when we say we're going to identify 35 million, could be 36, could be 34, could be a lot of things. Without some degree of specificity in the conversation, I don't think I'm a particularly effective steward of this institution. So perhaps you can help me.
No, and I really do appreciate that, and I know you mean it. That's why I said in the first part of this year, 2012, we'll be coming back to you telling you how we're going to hit the $35 million target. Frankly, commissioners, if it was easy, I would be here today telling you I'm going to cut $35 million and it's going to be here, 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 and here. I don't know where it's going to come from. We are working to see it. But we will come to you early in the year and tell you how we're going to cut that $35 million. Then we're going to, look, we have to do it early, because if we wait till the mid-year to cut 35, I've only got half a year. That's effectively a $70 million cut that we have to do. So we are going to work on this, and we're going to come back to you. I would please ask you, and I know the well intentions behind this proposal and this amendment, But if I don't know where the 35 is coming from, and you now ask me to come for another 20, and I'm still preparing for what may be an awful first quarter announcement as to what our tax subsidies are going to be, you're really putting a burden on us. And I may be back here telling you the service restorations that you put in place we're going to have to take back, which would be a horrible thing. Nobody wants to do that. I know you don't. I'm just telling you, this amendment is putting us in a position where we are going to lose our credibility, not restore credibility. And again, I know it's well-intentioned. I really believe that. But if I have $55 million that I don't know where it's coming from, and I have to address what might happen in the first quarter, we're talking significant reductions. So again, please, as you said, new information, just please consider that in your deliberations.
I'd like to just speak for a second and wear my hat as chairman of the Finance Committee. First of all, I've been, as you know, deeply involved in all this budget and this $750 million worth of very hard-fought savings that we've all achieved over the last couple of years. And this has not been a cavalier budget. I don't want anybody to think that the cuts that were made in service to our customers was a cavalier decision. We made these decisions based on a heck of a lot of study by the staff, a heck of a lot of study by this board, and the only reason we made these things is we had to keep this institution a solvent institution with the resources that we have. And if you look at it, if you take a look at the budgets that Bob presented, if we wouldn't have made that $750 million or $800 million savings here over the last 2 years, we'd be in deep trouble right now. And in knowing these numbers pretty well, I think it would be set a absolute wrong direction for this agency. We, as Bob said, are going to be faced with saving additional money over the next 6 months, not spending additional money. Everybody sitting around here would like to put more service in. I mean, obviously, it's just like chicken soup. Why not? It would be a great idea if we could do it. But the first order of this board is to make sure that the MTA has a realistic and solvent budget. And by throwing $20 million more expenses, because that's what you're doing, hiring more people, on top of a stressed budget right now is absolutely the wrong way to go. I assure you, as the finance chairman, if things improve and this dire forecast that we're all facing for the next 6 months, and don't kid yourself, I think that the numbers that we've gotten are more optimistic than real, and we could be facing some big cuts, as Bob said. If we don't come down that road, we can always readdress this situation as the spring and the summer unfolds. But to do it now, in the face of all this uncertainty, is fiscal irresponsibility, and that's all it is. When you consider what we've been through here to get us to the point where we are, where Bob presented. Who's next? John?
Thank you, Chairman. To reiterate what you said, I agree conceptually that if we can afford some improvements, we should do so, because that's the essential part of fulfilling our mission. And I wasn't on the board at the time when the cuts we're discussing were authorized, but I understand as a rider and commuter the heavy toll they've taken. But we can't forget what we just spent the last half hour listening to at this very meeting, where a review of the recent tax and revenue data was described to us, showing a worsening budget situation. And it's clearly been demonstrated that it's not the time to just blindly increase spending by some token amount, which is without identifying specific ways to pay for it. And I have not heard specific ways to pay for it. The events in Albany earlier this month that were also described at this meeting add a significant risk to the revenue projections of our entities. So it's a risky time from a budgetary perspective. I would support even larger restorations, but not now without a demonstrated way to pay for it and a way to balance our budget. So I support the executive director on this issue, but we'll be willing in the future to listen to specific restorations that are justified, not just based on a blind token amount, but for specific reasons that are paid for with specific dollars. Thank you.
Yeah, I sit here and I, like I say, I think everyone around this table would like to give service, more service. And there's been some discussion about the sharing of the pain. Well, I can tell you that we have non-represented employees here that haven't received raises in 3 years. And there's a morale problem out there that we have to face up to pretty quickly. So we can sit around, we talk about dollars, but we got people that work for us that haven't been given a raise in 3 years. And I don't think they're in a raise included in this year. This will be the 4th year. So the question becomes, while we want to cut back on our administrative help, and we've cut back the administration over the last couple of years, we have to start considering those people that work for us, that have worked for us for a number of years, that have, in probably the next couple of years, will have an opportunity to leave, because we are reaching that 30th anniversary. And we should consider that also. I don't know what those raises could add up to, but they're a factor. As we sit here talking about adding back service, we have people out there that are just making ends meet. Remember, the last 3 years haven't been the best. That's something we have to take into account. Thank you.
I think all of you know how I feel. It was a letter from me, the PCAC chair, to all of you regarding this issue. But first I want to congratulate the staff on the budget. It's well crafted. It's a very good job. But on the motion, I want to obviously I want to associate myself with both Commissioners Pally and Commissioners Capelli. I applaud them, and on behalf of the riders, I applaud them for this effort. If you look at our financials, for the first time, I think in a long time, the revenue from ridership is actually slightly better than projected for a couple of months. I think that's a good indication from that perspective. I understand the issues with subsidies completely. I used to work in the legislature. Having said that, it was a time when actually the legislature put money in specifically in the budget to restore service. I thought at that time that was an embarrassment for the MTA. I don't think we need to repeat that. I think this is the best time to restore service, and I think we should. I think we can. I think the commissioner's proposal is well thought out. I think there are some revenues that are looking up, marginally enough that we could pay for this. I think Commissioner Capelli's proposal that we'd come up with a plan, that it would start probably 6 months into the year, means that it wouldn't be a $20 million impact on this year, and maybe a $20 million impact on later years. The other thing we're seeing, and the rider sees this too, I think many riders do read the papers as we do, the state is now formulating a budget. It looks like they'll have an on-time budget even earlier. They're going to have an increase for schools, an increase for Medicaid. For transit, 0 or less. So let's see. My kids go to public schools, so that makes me happy. They cut the PMT for small businesses. That's me. So that saves me a few $100s, so I'm happy. But as a transit rider, I'm not. Transit riders are not going to be happy. They're going to be told they get the dirty end of the stick. More fare increases, and maybe even possibly service cuts. I probably not, but because I think everyone here knows that has to be the last thing we'll do. But I think it's time for us to say we do have money available for some small service increases. It's a very small percent of the budget, 0.17%, I think. That's what my letter said. And I think to show the rider that we're serious about providing service to them, we should definitely approve this, and I ask that my fellow board members vote in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I would welcome Commissioner Merdler and Commissioner Ferrer to this the wall of support over here for the.
We're from the Bronx,
which means we recognize no specific walls.
I see. Well said. Speaking again on behalf of the riders that I represent, and we all, of course, represent riders, I just would put my support behind this amendment and just conclude with the thought that it's at difficult times that the board provide leadership, and in this case, having heard the pain that has come across to us from the lectern in our own experience as rider representatives, and in objective analysis of the effect of these service cuts, that this board needs to provide leadership to the staff to say this is our priority. We want to get service back in as quick a fashion as possible, and this is a good first step, and for the staff to make every effort to accomplish that. I appreciate Bob's concerns about what he's going to have to do to make this happen, but given the size of the budget and the process through which these restorations could or would be instituted, it's my expectation that we could accomplish this and service the community that so desperately requires our help.
Mr. Chairman, I've had a conversation, as you've seen, with Mr. Capelli. First, I would like to thank you, Mr. Saul, and you, Chairman to-be Loda, and Bob Ferrand, for providing the kind of illumination that both the public and the members of this board need, the kind of reasoned thinking that portends well for the future. Let me suggest, and I think Commissioner Capelli will join me in this, that the proposal for the restoration become effective July 1 of 2012. That will allow us between now and July 1 of 2012 to get the facts, to know what the legislature will stand up and really do, what the governor's office will stand up and really do, what the mayor's office will stand up and really do, and all of the other eventualities that Bob pointed to as being concerns. But at least we have said to the public, in the event that the dire scenario does not come into being, that there is an opportunity through the excellence of service that Joe Loda will, I'm sure, provide, that we can find room for more, that's what we're going to do. That's our hope. That's the signal we send to the public.
Chuck, if I might answer you, as you know, this is the beginning of this is our preliminary, it's our budget that we're sending down for 2012. This is not going to be, in my opinion, the last budget that is sent, because we have changes all through the years. As a matter of fact, in July, we update the budget, just as you suggested, as a normal course of business at the Finance Committee, based on the facts as they come out, as the revenue comes out, as the subsidies come out. So this is going to be done anyway. We don't need an amendment to do this. This is a living work in process. So to me, to put this amendment in now, as you suggest, I just want to repeat again, sets the wrong message at a time when we don't know what the outcome of all these events are going to be.
It sends two messages. It sends a message to Albany and to City Hall, it's time to play or get away from the piano. If you care about public mass transit, put up or shut up. It sends a message, and the city has done its part, and I don't mean to criticize its past activities, Commissioner Kay, anticipating it. It sends a message as well to the riding public. That's what we're going to strive for. Why don't we want to give them that message in precise terms? That's what bothers me.
I think we've said enough now. We're going to call for a vote, please. I think what we have to do, Jim, could you please, as you understand the amendment, repeat it if you do understand it? Now let's just have one amendment. Let's just have an amendment that we can vote up or down on.
He might not agree.
As the maker of the original motion, I would accept that friendly amendment. I think that a prudent compromise here is to essentially internally begin to look at things with the goal of being able to implement this by July the 1st. If the fiscal situation changes, the executive director can come back and say, we're not saying that we're instituting this particular service on that date or that. We're not identifying the routes as of yet, but we're putting the staff, the agency presidents on notice that this is the direction that we want to go in. And if the fate changes, then just like as fate changes, we've had to deal with other situations, we'll deal with it. So I will accept that amendment in the spirit for which it's intended.
I have a question, another one. Is this properly then an amendment to the budget, to this budget?
I think it has to be, because to put the priority out there, you have to start to reallocate the funds. When the service goes into effect, or would it go into effect on July 1, is an assumption that will be made as we go forward. But I think you have to amend the budget now to do that, yes. In my opinion.
Please give us an amendment that we can vote.
I believe the motion with the friendly amendment accepted is a motion to reapportion money already committed to current other expenditures in the budget and to authorize the chairman to put $20 million of that toward the restitution of service, with that to be not to proceed until July 1st in any event, and to be deemed rescinded if the state budget does not provide dollar-for-dollar support for the reductions in PMT.
We should say, if it's this year, it's only $10 million this year. The budget impact is $10 million this year, but $20 going forward. If it's happening.
You have to speak to that.
Well, it's hard to vote on something as amorphous as this. I'm voting on Jell-O, but so just a point of a question for whomever is putting forth whatever we're supposed to be voting for. What if the tax revenues that were so carefully articulated by Bob Foran come in short, as Bob described, given the real world of what we know of the Wall Street bonuses to be? Where are we on this?
As the Chairman of Finance has clearly pointed out on a number of occasions, this is a document. A document moves from one side to another side as things happen.
I have a specific question on what I'm voting for. We can agree to disagree on...
No, we're asking that $20 million at the moment be reallocated from current uses to a restoration of service fund, such services to go into effect on July 1, 2012. As Andrew has clearly pointed out, there will be a number of occasions between now and then as to whether or not what happens in that regard. But just as we have other things in here that may or may not happen depending upon events we don't control, we have a restoration of service fund that would go into effect, assuming nothing else changes in that regard. But I think putting it in the budget now sends the right signal that this board is committed to restoration of some portion of the services and to do it now. When we get a February report, we get a February report. But this is important, in my opinion, to do now.
Mitch,
it's a series of projections as we go along.
Look, we have an amendment.
We're more than happy to vote.
All right, look, you have an amendment now. Do you think, is it necessary to repeat the amendment again? Does everybody understand the amendment? We understand. Okay. All right, so then let's go. We have an amendment. We have a motion for the amendment. A second. We have a second, correct? Now, all right, so now we need a vote on Alan Capelli's amendment. Jim, would you please take the roll?
Andrew Saul?
No.
Jonathan Ballin? No. Alan Capelli?
Yes.
Fernando Ferrer?
Yes.
Jeffrey Kay?
No.
Mark LeBeau?
No.
Charles Merdler?
Yes.
Mitch Paley?
Yes.
Nancy Chevelle? No. Robert Pickford?
No.
Susan Metzger? No. James Sador?
No.
Carl Wartendijk? The motion to amend is defeated by a vote of 6-4, counting the vote of the Hudson Valley members as a collective vote.
Thank you, Jim. Now, we have also a motion for the adoption of the budget as presented by Bob Foran. We have a motion. A second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
How many noes are there? Two noes, 3 noes. So the motion, the budget has now carried. Okay, thank you. Next, can I have a motion? Can I have a motion to approve the MTA 2010 to 2014 Capital Program Amendment for submission to the MTA Capital Program Review Board?
Motion made.
A second, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Wait, let's get this right. How many opposed votes are there to the capital plan? Alan? There's 1 opposed vote, Jim. Okay? The capital plan is approved to be sent up to Albany. Okay, next item on our agenda is the Committee on Finance, which I chaired. There are 2 MTA headquarters action items this month. Both of these action items are described in the meeting materials. The first item is to approve MTA and TBTA reimbursement resolutions. I move this item. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. The second item is to approve a remarketing agent. I move this item. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. There are no competitive procurements. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 8 competitive procurements in the total amount of $199.5 million. I move the competitive procurements. May I have a second, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. There are no separate ratification actions this month. There are 8 real estate action items this month, which are described in the meeting materials. I'll move the real estate actions. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Mark, could you please report on the Transit Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mark,
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. There are 3 action items. The first action item is for the board to approve the addition of a project, as Linda mentioned, to the 2010-2014 capital program to address electrical and structural work in the Steinway Tube, as described in the materials before you. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second, please. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
The second item is for the board to authorize MTA Capital Construction to enter into an agreement with a Digby Management Company for work relating to the 2nd Avenue Subway project at 200 East 63rd Street in an amount not to exceed $250,000. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
The third action item is for the board to increase the approved amount of funding for design work at 250 East 87th Street in an amount not to exceed $230,768 for work related to the 2nd Avenue Subway project. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
There are 9 procurement actions totaling $700.1 million. There are 3 non-competitive procurements, 2 for MTA New York City Transit and 1 for MTA Capital Construction in the total amount of $34.5 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
There are 4 competitive procurements, 3 for MTA New York City Transit and 1 for MTA Capital Construction in the total amount of $656.1 million. Regarding the systems contract for the 2nd Avenue Subway, the committee was informed that a protest had been submitted by a bidder that was not selected for the contract award. As a result, we will not award the contract to the proposed contractor, the highest bidder, until the protest is resolved in a manner that permits such an award. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Vote, please.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
There are two ratifications, both for MTA New York City Transit, in a total amount of $9.5 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
All in favor, please?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
This exhausts and concludes the Transit Committee report.
Bus operations, Nancy?
Okay, there were no non-competitive procurements or ratifications this month. However, there are two competitive procurements in the total amount of $32.5 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
That's it.
Nancy, thank you. Short and sweet. Metro North, Long Island Railroad, Mitch.
Yep. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Long Island Railroad Committee met this month and reports the following. There are 4 non-competitive procurements, 2 for Metro North and 2 for Long Island Railroad, in a total amount of $8.7 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
There are 9 competitive procurements, 2 for Metro North, 5 for Long Island Railroad, and 2 for MTA Capital Construction Company, in the total amount of $127.27 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
And there are 2 ratifications for Metro North in the total amount of $54,597. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
That concludes the report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Before we do the bridges and tunnels, we need to go back on the transit just to make a clarification. Nothing you did wrong. Just go ahead, Jim.
With respect to the vote on competitive procurements, I believe that one of the procurements considered by the Committee on Transit Operations was a modification to an existing contract with Ove Arup & Partners, the staff summary for which is found on page 82 of the board materials. And my understanding was that was not being advanced to the board for board approval after the Finance Committee meeting. Was not being advanced to the board for approval after the Finance Committee meeting.
So do we?
So I think we should take a revote on the competitive procurements with that clarification for transit.
Okay, Mark, go ahead. You're back on.
All right, I call for a revote on the procurements with that correction.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is passed again. Okay. Committee on Bridges and Tunnels, Alan.
Bridges and Tunnels met this month and reports the following. Number 1 action item this month is for the board to approve proposed lease agreement with Keyspan Gas East Corporation doing business as National Grid, as described in the materials distributed for this meeting. Committee recommends this action, and I move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
There are no non-competitive procurements. However, there are 10 competitive procurements in the total amount of $16,403,000. Committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
There are no ratifications, and this concludes the Bridges and Tunnels Committee report. Thank you, Mr.
Alan. Okay. Now may I have a motion, please, to convene an executive session to discuss a matter pursuant to Section 105(1)(e) of the New York State Public Offices Law and an update on labor negotiations.
Motion made.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.
Good morning.
Mr. Loda, if the governor does not keep his word and restore the $310 million taken from the MTA budget, do you think we would face service cuts and a fare hike this coming year in 2012?
Well, you know, I'll try to answer. I'm not an attorney, but I really don't like answering hypotheticals. I take the governor and the speaker and the majority leader at their word that every penny will be restored that we would have gotten from the PMT. And I do not expect to have any service cuts during my tenure.
Your tenure being?
I can't tell you how long that'll be. I'm sorry. It hasn't started yet. Yes.
I wanted to ask, what have been the biggest surprises since you started on the MTA in just the last few weeks? What really kind of surprised you about actually being in charge of the agency?
On two levels. One, how strong each one of the operating agencies are, how independently operated they are. I think it's not recognized by the general public. I'm also surprised that when reporters have nothing to write about, they tend to seem to write about something minor that went wrong at the MTA and make it into a bigger issue. Such as how great, I'll give you an example. I still believe, and I've encouraged everybody at the MTA to be proud of what was negotiated with with Apple and in the Apple Store. I think it is, I'm looking forward to the investigations, as they've all said that they were going to have, and what a great deal it is. It's receiving 4 times the amount of revenue that had been being received, combined with the fact that it's bringing an enormous amount of traffic into the shopping portion of Grand Central Terminal.
Chairman, were you
Not yet.
Executive Director, were you surprised about the relatively close vote today on the service?
No, I wasn't surprised. I understand the passion about service cuts and the passion about restoring service cuts. And as I said in my comment, when the economic times change, and I have seen economic times change in my life and in my career. When I was budget director in New York City for the first year and a half, it was a dismal period, and then all of a sudden we saw the economy rising, and we were able to do things and expand the budget. My hope that it happens here, my hope, and as I said, it was my hope and my prayer, that someday we could restore service cuts that had happened last year.
Mr. Lona, about 8 months ago, then Chairman Walder said that the MTA program for repairing escalators and elevators was inadequate, and they would have to come up with a new plan. I asked him twice after that about it. He said they didn't come up with a plan. Do you agree with what he said, and is there a new plan in place now?
There's an increased vigilance on both escalators as well as elevators, combined with the fact that we've started a pilot program. I think it's up online already on our website, mta.info, where anytime an elevator or an escalator is out, it's there. You can also put in your email address or your cell phone number and either get an email or a text message if you're interested, for example, in the elevators at Clark Street, the 2 and 3 train in Brooklyn Heights. And if they're out, if one of them's out but 2 are still working, it'll send you a text message and an email that it's happening. It's all starting. That's one on transparency and information, combined with the fact that we're working very closely with our contractors to make sure that they, as well as our workers, to make sure that they increase the speed in which they make the repairs.
What about the escalators that are privately maintained by companies?
We've been in discussions with those companies and the same folks who do their repairs, that they honor their commitments to the riders of the transit system.
Will the approach to the private companies be a little different? For example, at 53rd and 3rd Avenue, the one that's connected or maintained by the Lipstick Building, has been out now essentially for 5 years. They claim that they would start repairing it by April of this coming year, and I've been watching. I take the subway there every day, and I've not seen anything change there except it being boarded up in the last 8 months. Is there going to be a different approach to the private owners who did get variances from the city in exchange for maintaining?
We will work with the private owners. I don't know the specifics of that situation. I will find out more information and reach out to the owners to find out, to see if they can do that as quickly as possible.
Forgive my confusion. Mention was made that this budget proposal is coming out this month. The original plan was to put it out next month, and I understood that to be something about getting the information to Albany or sending a message to Albany. Could you expand on that?
Right. But the capital budget last month, which we had presented at that time, we said that we were going to present it sometime subsequent to the State of the State address. In the intervening period of time, a lot of work has gone on in Albany about the capital budget at the Albany level, dealing with the PMT. So the process has begun. It was appropriate for us to then, just on the capital budget, not wait until after the State of the State address, but to do it as quickly as possible so we could send the capital budget off to the Capital Program Review Board in Albany for its approval. Nothing at all to do with the operating budget. The operating budget is presented in December for 2012 was to be voted on at the December meeting. Okay.
About the creative ways that the city and the MTA are working together to try to find additional funding? Or is it...
Similar to labor negotiations, I'd rather not discuss that in the press until I talk to all the parties involved.
So how are they going?
Sorry?
So how are the negotiations going?
Everything has been cooperative. We've had discussions. There are meetings going on at the departmental level between the MTA and the TW 100, where at each level to look at various different work rule changes and recommendations on the part of the labor union of things that can be changed. That process is ongoing. At the higher levels, John Samuelson and I continue to meet, continue to get to know each other, continue to look forward to the hard work that will go into a new contract subsequent to January 15th of next year.
The word fragile was used over and over again in regard to this budget. What does that mean exactly?
And that's why I used the word fragility at one point. I thought the word fragile was being used a lot. The budget itself is tenuous. There are a lot, as in all budgets, there are assumptions to be made. What makes this budget even more fragile is the economic conditions that we're in right now. And as Bob Fran, the CFO, discussed, we're waiting to see the numbers to come in for the payroll mobility tax, which is indicative of Wall Street bonuses, which comprise a significant portion of the overall income tax revenues in the city of New York and in the region as well. So if you look at it from that standpoint, we have question marks about the stability of the revenue streams coming in, combined with the fact that we still have, as I mentioned and as Bob mentioned, continuation of our program to eliminate the gap or to reduce our expenses.
Can I follow up just one?
Sure.
So, but there's no contemplation of any service cuts or fare increases this coming year?
That is correct. There are no contemplation of either. Thank you. Thanks.